What's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd, Koshal, and Max Smith here. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow Max on Twitter at Max Smith ESM and myself on Twitter at Usayd Koshal. Max, it's been a minute. It's been a while. Been a minute is what the kids say nowadays, but we had a bye week of our own last week. We're ready to get things going again, and the Bears return to Hallis Hall today. But how are you?
I'm doing good. Just got a little bit sick, so I had fortunate that it was sickness on the bye week. We apologize for missing any videos. We're really dedicated to this. This is something that we really want to keep rolling with. So we appreciate you. We just hit 200 subscribers, which is big for us. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. We hope you enjoyed your bye week, and we have some good video ideas coming out. So make sure you stay tuned. But today we're gonna do our mid-season recap. We're technically halfway through the season. There is no more clean halfway because they decided to make it an odd number of games. So I guess halfway through the halfway week is officially 8.5 weeks in the NFL season now. So that's the real halfway point. But we definitely have some interesting things to talk about with where the state of the team is right now at 3-6. We may dive into a potential way for the Bears to make a playoffs here. This second half of the season is tough, but it looks a lot less tough than it did just 2 or 3 weeks ago. We want to talk about what we learned as we watch the rest of the league during the bye week. What happened on Monday night against Pittsburgh? The Bears should really be 4-5 right now, but that's a different conversation. We'll get there. And then, of course, like Usayd said, we're going to talk about our boy Tevin finally, Big Tev finally back, what that means for Jason Peters and Larry Borum moving ahead. But let's start off with the thing that happened first. If you want to spend any time on Monday night, here's your chance, Usayd. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it was once again a typical Bears game, okay? Because take the referees out of the equation, and when you have 12 penalties for 115 yards, I honestly think you don't deserve to win the game. Now, again, and this is irrespective of the referees, which we'll get into in just a moment or two here. But ultimately, it's just like you look at the Bears, they start out so slow, and then things began clicking when Justin Fields started clicking. And that's such a key point right there because when you look around the league, you look at the really good teams, take the Seahawks, the Packers, the Chiefs, for example, who, yeah, they've gotten off to a slow start this year, but they've really shown that, hey, in years past, we've been one of the better teams. You look at the Patriots and the Buccaneers with Tom Brady. You look at a team like the Atlanta Falcons, whose time now is passed and Matt Ryan's done. He's only got a little bit gas left in the tank. But there were some prime years in Atlanta. What was the common theme? Is that when those offenses got clicking, when those quarterbacks got clicking. And so when those quarterbacks got clicking and they were in a rhythm, those teams like the Packers, the Seahawks, the Saints, with Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, all those teams, when those QBs were clicking, the offenses were clicking. We saw that this past Monday night with Justin Fields and the Bears. So that was my biggest takeaway. In regards to the refereeing, I mean, look, the low block, the late hit on Justin Fields in the fourth quarter, there were two plays that wiped off basically. Well, one of the plays wiped off a touchdown off the board. The low block was not even a low block. It was pretty much just like James Daniels breathing on one of the Steelers' defensive linemen, and that was that. The late hit, well, those are calls that hopefully future Hall of Fame quarterbacks like Justin Fields are hopefully going to get pretty soon. But ultimately, it's just like the NFL needs a complete, and I'll say this because I'm tired of talking about it, but what the NFL needs is a complete overhaul of the officiating system. It needs to look at what's taunting, what's not taunting, what's a catch, what isn't a catch. It's just like now, and I'll use the what's a catch rule as an example. Now we have clear and obvious terminology and language and evidence of what to look for to determine whether it's a catch. You need to have full control of the ball. You need to take at least 3 steps with full control of the ball in your hands in order for it to be a valid catch. Okay. Now, what are we seeing, though, is it's just like they don't know. The league doesn't know what taunting is. And it's an issue because you're taking the fun out of the game. And side note, if you watch Packers Seahawks on Sunday night Sunday afternoon football, which is considered a primetime game, by the way, because it's the Fox or the CBS nationally televised game of the week. Adrian Amos decided to pick the ball off and then throw the ball back into the field of play as a means of celebration. And it wasn't called taunting, so I don't need to say anything more about how badly the refs are messed up here.
Yeah. It is a little frustrating, and I said this while I was watching the game. I said, this is your big night. Like every week, there's only one game that's on every television across the country, right? And that's Sunday Night Football. Well, maybe Monday Night Football, but the real draw is always Sunday night, right? So, from a league perspective, from the business perspective, it is the worst case scenario that your big crown jewel every week in and week out, is completely dominated by the referees. You, as the fan, want to watch the game played as it's meant to be played with the passion of the players, right? You don't want to watch the refs, the zebras come in and completely change the scope of the game. And I can't tell you how many famous Steelers personalities have come out and apologized and said, I am so sorry that game was stolen from you. There's zero reason we should have won. You guys should have wiped the floor. The Bears were the better team than against the Steelers that night. And I'm willing to say that the Bears are a better team than the Steelers in general. I honestly think that this 3-6 record is well deserved, but not indicative of the talent that this roster can produce at. So it does frustrate me because look, if the Bears win that game, they're 4-5 heading into the bye week. They're right in the thick of it for a playoff picture, right? We're right on the bubble at 4-5 because the NFC is rather weak right now outside of a powerhouse here and there. Like we're second to the bottom in the league right now. We're tied with all the other 3-6 bottom feeders. There's a good amount of them, but the Vikings win. So they're 4-5 now. We're 3-6. If Vikings play Green Bay next week, they lose that game. They're 4-6. Bears beat the Ravens. We'll have a really good Ravens breakdown as well later this week. We're at 4-6 right there together, right? So was a really weird opportunity that if the Steelers wouldn't have been able to get or weren't gifted that game from the NFL, the Bears could be looking at a potential 500 record going into the most competitive part of the season where they could have made the playoffs. Now, we said this a long time ago. Best thing for the Bears this season is to not make the playoffs because that means that people might lose their jobs. So it's a really weird, bittersweet thing for me to go, I want us to win, right? I'll never root for us not to win. But it's a little upsetting that we could be looking at a potential playoff picture if that game handles out a little bit differently. But completely well said. You said you're completely right on a lot of aspects there. The NFL needs to just sit down with all the owners over the summer and say, this is exactly what taunting is. You guys voted for it. You guys are in agreement of it. Let's write it down and let's put it as a standard across all forms of officiating. Because if the NFL holds themselves to a certain standard, right? You're completely right. They can't let Aaron Rodgers make a big fuss out of, a 10-yard scramble for a touchdown and scream at fans who paid money to go to that game, right? But the only reason why they do it is because it's a fan-owned organization. But we'll talk about that in a future episode if I ever decide to make that episode and I don't have some hit squad sent by Green Bay out against me because I talk about the preferential treatment they get because they're a fan-owned organization and the NFL doesn't want to touch with the money coming out of there. But moving on, let's talk about Tevin Jenkins real quick. Let's jump into that because that's incredibly exciting news. Tevin Jenkins' 21-day practice window has officially opened, which means we're getting Big Tev back. Back is finally healed up, apparently. We also got Deion Bush announced in the 21-day practice opening by Matt Nagy earlier today. That's really big, exciting news, right? This year is entirely dependent on the progression of our rookies. We wanted to see how our rookies were doing. And then right out of the gate, our two big rookies that anchor the line were hurt. Larry Borum's looked pretty good. He hasn't looked great consistently out of his 2 games. It's a really small sample size, so it's kind of rude to do that to him. But he didn't look all that great in the Steelers game, but he looked serviceable, which is what you want out of a rookie. What do you think we should do with Tevin Jenkins? Do you think we should immediately plug and play him? We should take Jason Peters out, doing a pretty good job, but do the next man up mentality? Or do you think we should let Tevin kind of ease back into a role? Or do we even have him play at the other side of the line and take out Larry?
Well, I think it all starts and ends with the quarterback, right? So, and the reason I say this is because your offensive line needs to be dictated, and the schemes you run have to be dictated on what your quarterback is good at and isn't good at. Okay. If your quarterback is really mobile, like Justin Fields is, you can afford to have a hole or two there in your offensive line, right? If your quarterback's a traditional pocket passer like a Ben Roethlisberger, well, then you better have a Pro Bowl offensive line full of all pros year in and year out. But The reason I bring Justin up is because the Bears are still continuing to find their identity on offense. We know and we've said, okay, it's been run first. But then if you look over the last couple of weeks, Justin and the Bears on the offense, the identity certainly, and it's continuing to evolve. Now, why do I even bring that up? I bring that up because the Bears have shown with Justin Fields, and Justin Fields has shown that over the last 2 weeks, rather than just always throw the deep ball, I'm going to be able to hit these throws that are short to intermediate to deep. I'm going to let the game slow down. I'm just going to take what the defense gives me. And why? Because sometimes a 5, 6, 7 yard completion is way better when a team is down and a team like the Bears struggles to move the ball compared to a 30, 40, 50 yard completion. The flashy big plays are great, but it's the little things that really can get the job done sometimes. And so with Tevin Jenkins, I think with him back in the lineup, I'm sneaky suspicion here he's going to start this weekend against the Ravens, because I was already right and I had it before anyone on the Bears beat Sunday night when I tweeted and said that we might get an update about Tevin Jenkins, or I anticipate getting an update about Tevin Jenkins. So credit me for that, please, and thank you. Also, just hit 3,500 followers on Twitter. But ultimately, what has to happen is this, is that you have to slide in Tevin Jenkins at left tackle. Why? Because you released Charles Leno Jr. back in the spring, specifically to slide in Tevin Jenkins at left tackle, and then move Jason Peters to left guard, move Cody Whitehair to center, move James Daniels back to right guard, okay? Or have Whitehair as well as Daniels be your guards, all right? Or Whitehair at center, then have Peters and Daniels as your guards, and have Larry Borum as your offensive tackle. I know you're looking at the eye. I know you gave me the eye roll there, but ultimately what has to happen is this, is that there's one guy on this offensive line who we were both high on, and he's a good run blocking center, but isn't really stout in pass protection. I think that the Sam Mustipher experiment is totally over. This isn't to say that Sam is a bad player. He just needs a bit more development, and he needs to add more strength to his frame to become a true anchor in pass protection. All right. In a pass happy league, you need to be able to pass protect with efficiency, especially as a center. Sam has shown us time and time again, I can be effective in the run game. I can be a player on the offensive line, the center, who's basically going to be the quarterback and call out the stunts, the fronts, and whatever I see and communicate it to the rest of the offensive line as well as the QB. But he hasn't gotten it done in pass protection. And the Bears are slowly beginning to morph their identity into a pass first team. We're seeing it more and more. So you need to make that change. And ultimately, let's just be honest about something. Jason Peters is not going to be on the Bears in 2022. Tevin Jenkins, Larry Borum, and Cody Whitehair are. Sam Mustipher is probably going to be here. Alex Bars is going to be here. All right. There's a chance James Daniels is here. So you have to just start to get a glimpse of the future and see what you have in 2021 to allow you to build and change and shift and mold your offensive game plan as well as your offseason plan for 2022.
Right. This is a good opportunity to kind of probe for any holes. You're completely right. Jason Peters is going to be in his 40s here pretty soon. And for a man this old already, he's moving pretty well, which is fantastic. That isn't to knock on his playing ability thus far. He's been exactly what he was sold as, and even then some. I think he's been one of the more surprising acquisitions this offseason, just as how well he's handled his role. He's actually tied ninth for the least sacks amount allowed in the NFL. With I think just 4 in the season thus far, which, and then again, we can talk about how much of those are Justin's fault or QB driven. But regardless, Jason Peters has served the job incredibly well. But I think it's at the time where we need to just ask him to step back a little bit. He was brought in additionally to mentor these guys as well. I remember Sam Mustipher on a press conference during training camp when they announced that they signed Jason Peters, and just how excited he was for the opportunity to meet a legend like Jason Peters. Sam Mustipher was also undrafted, so that's a big connection there. Jason Peters was undrafted. Fun fact. And he's had basically a Hall of Fame, if not 100% a Hall of Fame career, coming out and really proving himself as one of the best tackles in the past decade or two now. He's been in the league that long. But no, you're entirely and completely right. There's a lot to look at for this offensive line moving forward, and you don't know where your holes are until you put out the finished product and start pouring the water over it. Until you start seeing some of the blitz schemes, until you start seeing where exactly the weaknesses are against your offensive line, you're not going to know where you need to go out in the offseason and pick up the new additions. You're not going to know where you're going to need to target in the draft. And there's a good amount of offensive line talent in this draft that we will make a video about, because I'm going to make sure we do, because there's just a ton of it out there that makes me really fired up as a hog molly guy. So you should be fired up too. But what I'm trying to say is, if Sam Mustipher is a problem in this offensive line, we won't know 100% for sure until every single starter is out there starting, which means Tevin Jenkins out there at tackle. If Larry Borom is a long-term solution, he's going to be out there at tackle as well. And then we can start plugging around and start to play. But the number one thing for offensive lines and doing well, it's called consistency. The more these guys play with each other, the more these guys get a natural feel for each other, the more these guys trust each other, they're just going to get better and better and better. And the benefit of having Tevin Jenkins in there is the oldest guy on that field is Cody Whitehair. And offensive linemen last a pretty long time in the league if they stay healthy and if they stay paid. So if Chicago Bears have something good going, and I think Ryan Pace did a really good job with redesigning this offensive line, because Larry Borum's played incredibly well for where he was drafted, right? If Tevin Jenkins can live up to that performance and then some, he's already going to be billed as sold. And he's going to be, we're just going to look at a really good core line for the next 2-3 years. James Daniels in a contract year, like you mentioned, but I think he's one of the guys that the Bears aren't going to be willing to let him walk without at least giving him some sort of, really good, really appeasing qualifying offer. So I completely agree with you. I think you might even have a conversation right of putting Peters in an interior line position, but I don't think that would ever happen. I just don't think that's the kind of body that he's built for. But, that might be a conversation to look at towards the season is, do we pull Sam Mustipher out? And I have nothing but amazing things to say about his run blocking, his ability to elevate to the second half of the field. He's got incredibly quick feet. But we said, this is exactly what I said in the breakdown earlier in the beginning of this summer, in this offseason, was his strength just isn't there. And that's something that he put pounds on over the offseason. And he just needs to put a little bit more room or work in that weight room. Work in that weight room. Say that 5 times fast. And Juan Castillo, offensive line coach for the Bears, have been nothing but good things to say about Sam Mustipher, and entirely rightfully so. He stepped up and did a really good job. But now I think it's time, that part of talent acquisition where you go, is this what we really want to stick with? Is that really going to be enough? Or do we need a guy who's going to bring us to the next level? So completely right, completely well said. And I'd like to hope that Sam can make that next level, because he has every intangible you want out of a center. He just really needs to have a year or two more in the weight room, honestly, but I don't know if this team can wait that long. But outside of that, what did we learn? Did we cover that? What did we learn about the Bears during the bye week? Did we talk about that?
Yeah, let me add one more thing on. So I'm just going to say this, is that traditionally, if you look at 2019 and 2020, the last 2 seasons, when have the Bears made that offensive line change in terms of at the center position? It's always been at the bye week. And so they've kind of used that week to really evaluate, or I should say Matt Nagy's used that week to evaluate what's going on, probably sitting in his basement at home with his wallpaper, which is just all of his like play call sheets and stuff. And I know that from the 2020 NFL draft.
Better than the hotel room.
Yeah, better than the hotel room. But anyway, so the point is we learned a lot about the Bears during the bye week. And I think that one of the big positives about the Bears not playing on Sundays is that we get an opportunity to kind of go ahead and watch other teams around the league. Now, if you're in the Midwest area yesterday, which is like Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and a whole bunch of other states, the main 12 o'clock game yesterday that was nationally televised was the Patriots and the Browns. Now, why do I bring the Patriots up? I bring the Patriots up because they have a rookie quarterback, much like the Bears. And then I bring the Browns up because the Browns are the biggest poster example in all 5 American sports of how the talent can be there, but if you don't have the right front office, then your talent doesn't mean anything. And if you don't have the right front office, you can't acquire the right talent. But I bring those 2 teams up simply because both of those guys have a blueprint the Bears can follow. Now, with Mac Jones, why am I bringing him up? Because he's going to be compared to Justin Fields. Right now, Mac Jones is giving me Matt Ryan vibes. That's legitimately he's reminding me of, okay? A really talented pocket passer. Mobility isn't necessarily a strength, but really a smart, instinctive player. Ultimately, when you look at the Patriots, what did they do? They went into the summer, started training camp, had Cam Newton as well as Mac Jones on the roster. And then they just realized, hey, Mac is outplaying Cam Newton to the point where we don't need Cam Newton here to have effective quarterback play, because we are going to use this summer and just use the entire season to build around Mac Jones. Now, imagine a world where your head coach didn't make the entire summer about a veteran bridge quarterback that's probably not even going to be here next year, or about a so-called plan to develop your rookie quarterback. Imagine a world where Justin Fields got those first team reps from the very beginning. The Bears season expectations and outlooks would be so much more different. And so I bring that Patriots Browns game up, those two situations up, just as a means of showing when you commit to your talented rookie quarterback from day one, you know what? Really good things can happen. When you surround and put him in the right situation, really good things can happen. All right. Now, not every situation is going to be perfect. Not every situation is going to be ideal. We have to understand something is that Max upside isn't as high as a Justin Fields or a Trevor Lawrence. But what you can't deny is that Mac was never necessarily a bad prospect coming out of Alabama. He was always a really good one. He just was not as flashy or as athletic as a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields.
Right. And what I called Mac Jones the other day, talking to a Patriots fan of mine, who was actually from New England, by the way. So he's like a homegrown Patriots fan. There's not too many of them out there that I've interacted with, at least. But I was saying, Mac Jones. What I really find interesting about Mac Jones is that it's really hard to see him get better week to week. Kind of looks like the same guy out there every week. But it's good enough, right? It's serviceable for the team. And I called him Justin Herbert without the legs. Because they both have great arms. They're both incredibly smart at reading defenses. But Mac Jones isn't going to move out of the pocket the way that, Justin Herbert's not going to move out the pocket the way Justin Fields can. But at least Justin has a little bit more athletic capabilities. But Mac Jones is perfect for that system, right? They got literally Tom Brady light. A guy who's going to sit there, make the right throws at the right time, and probably win you football games, right? Now, if Mac Jones was drafted by a different team, I'm not sure we're looking at him the way that we're looking at him because he's not surrounded by that brain trust, right? But that tells you just how well coaching matters in this league. I'm not calling Tom Brady, that guy by any means. We proved it wrong in Tampa Bay. But, there's a lot similarities there. And it's not like Mac Jones has a lot of high caliber wide receiver talent he's throwing to anyways, or a lot of studs and, Pro Bowlers on his offense, but neither did Tom Brady for a long time. I mean, outside of Randy Moss and Deion Branch and Ron Gronkowski, but anyways, no, Mac Jones is definitely an interesting one to look at. When I thought, and this will change right now, but when I was the draft night, when I looked at the first round and I saw all these different names going, all these different quarterbacks and the 5 big names, I said to myself, the guys who are going to be compared the most are Trey Lance and Justin Fields. Why? Because their games are so similar. All of these guys are going to be compared for the rest of their careers, though. Like, let's not make any doubt about it. What we heard with Deshaun Watson, Mitch Trubisky, and Pat Mahomes, we're going to hear that for all 5 of these guys for as long as they're in the league together. That's just a reality that we're going to have to accept. However, I'm fairly confident that we got one of the better, if not the best guy thus far in the season. Mac Jones is going to be in the NFL for a long time. I don't doubt that question. Mac Jones is probably going to win a lot of football games. I don't doubt that question. But Justin Fields is going to be a lot more fun to watch. And he's going to make a lot more flashy plays. And he's probably going to win a lot more football games because of what he can do on the football field, right? So that's why I'm personally happy we got our guy Justin. But what else did I learn from the NFL this bye week? I learned that the Seahawks need to figure something out at the coaching position. I think they really need to figure something out. I think we're looking at a potential win there. I think that there isn't really a single really good team in the NFL this year. I think everybody who. I don't. And usually at this point in the year, you can look at a team and go, "Yeah, comfortably, I think they're going to win the Super Bowl." This year, I don't know if I can do it. I think honestly, the best looking team this far this year, the most consistent in and out every game this year has been Green Bay, and that hurts to say. But when Aaron Rodgers is back there, this defense is stellar right now. Aaron Rodgers is back there; they're stellar. But I guarantee you, they're still going to choke in the NFC Championship game. But I'm telling you right now, they're going to get that far because they're just this well execution, well coached team that only held Kansas City to 13 points. And if Aaron Rodgers was in that position, he probably would have been a different conversation. He probably would have beat the Chiefs there. So I don't know. Anything could happen for the rest of this season is what I'm saying, is what I've learned this bye season. Anything can happen for the rest of the season for Chicago Bears. They could easily beat the Ravens. I mean, if Miami could do it, I'm pretty sure the Bears could do it, right? They could probably beat the Cardinals at this point. Who knows what unit Arizona is going to put out there? Because if Kyler Murray's not in the backfield and if DeAndre Hopkins isn't out there out wide, Cardinals probably don't win football games against mediocre teams like the Chicago Bears. I tell you what, we're definitely going to beat the Seahawks. I'm just telling you right now, it's in my gut. I can feel it. And we're definitely going to beat the New York Giants just because they have a draft pick. And that'll be a really fun game, the clown on the Giants fans, that we beat them. So, what I learned, again, I'm going to say it, is we really don't know anything at this point in the season, what the NFL looks like.
Well, it certainly is interesting. And again, you look at the Bears schedule, it's crazy because we were sitting here week 4 or 5 and we were looking at the next stretch of games, which was the Packers, the Buccaneers, the 49ers, and Steelers. And we were looking at that as being the easiest stretch. And now we're beginning to see more and more like the pack is starting to separate itself, right? So there's not one singular team that you mentioned. You're like, okay, that could be a team that could absolutely blow the doors off everybody. There's no 2019 or 2020 Kansas City Chiefs this year. Those things just don't exist. Ultimately, when you look at it, I think the playing field certainly evened out. I think that when you have kind of this extra crossover game between NFC and AFC, it certainly adds a lot more extra speculation into the pot because that's like almost a must-win game for you in terms of playoff seeding, even though the individual conference seedings don't necessarily affect each other. But it's still another game, depending on who your opponent is, that could make or break whether or not you make the playoffs. When you look at the Bears, I mean, I think that another intriguing thing to keep in mind here is we're getting out of the bye week. And let's just be honest, the Bears have been absolutely terrible coming out of the bye when it comes to Matt Nagy. All right, they lost in 2018, lost in 2019. 2020, well, pretty sure they lost 2, or they might have won that one. I think it was like a mid-season bye last year, like a week 7 or 8. But ultimately, it's just like for the Bears, last point I'm going to make here is if they're going to get this thing rolling, because you have a whole bunch of Bears fans that are ready to say we're going to go 11-6, that's fine. But it starts this Sunday. If you're going to turn the season around, it starts this Sunday. Because then after that, you have an easy opportunity against Detroit. Okay, 4 days later. And then you have a mini bye with a 10-day break. And then December 5th, the Cardinals are coming to town. Then after that, you know what? You got the Vikings on the schedule. And then you got the Packers as well. In the month of December, you're traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. And then you're kind of rounding it out with the Giants as well as the Vikings. So the Bears have, there's a chance here to rattle off a couple wins and make this season look more respectable than it is. And I'll say this much. I don't care if the Bears miss the playoffs as long as Justin Fields in the offense shows a lot of progression. Okay. I also want to emphasize this. We have 8 games remaining in the season. Matt Nagy's fate is not sealed yet. I want people to understand something. I've long said this, that Matt Nagy's probably not returning in 2022. But I also think that what's going to happen is with the way Justin's played over the last 2 games, if you're the McCaskey family, you're sitting upstairs and you're realizing right now, you know what? If this keeps up, we might just consider bringing Matt Nagy back in 2022 because the future is not the defense. The future is Justin Fields. And anything and everything that Justin does feeds directly into whatever Matt Nagy's doing. And that's just going to give ownership more and more incentive to bring back Matt Nagy in 2022, as well as Ryan Pace. Ultimately, what does that mean? It means that for Bears fans, considering this, you can never have anything nice, okay? The bet you want Justin Fields to do great, but then it comes at the expense of keeping Matt Nagy as your head coach. Let's just leave it at that.
Right. No, I would love to leave it at that, but I wanna talk about that. So because it makes a lot of sense. Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy made their Hail Mary on Justin Fields. There was a lot of talk about them potentially losing their jobs over the offseason. They make it to the draft, they make a play, and they draft their guy. Justin is the guy for the future of this franchise, future of these 2 guys' jobs, right? So it makes perfect sense that if Justin's out there and he's throwing dimes, ownership goes, wait a second, this was the guy that they said to trust. This is the guy that we're supposed to trust, and he's doing well. So maybe we should be trusting Matt. Maybe Matt knows what he's doing. Maybe Ryan knows what he's doing, right? And at the end of the day, I think win and loss isn't really going to depict anything. I think you're right. But here's why I would like the Bears to win more games. 1, because I'm a fan and it's nice to see us win. But 2, I need to see Justin win more. I want Justin to win more games, right? Because when Justin wins more, he gets more confident. He gets more swaggy. He gets looser in the pocket. We see him play better in games where he's just absolutely dominating, right? And how hard is it for you in the mental to put up numbers like you did on a game to lose by a field goal? That's that one that hurts a lot because you feel like your team let you down, right? You put out everything you could on the field and you're all over Twitter. You're all over SportsCenter, but your team still lost at the end of the day. That's got to do something to you. Two, that makes you hungry. That makes you want to perform even better. But in the back of your head, you know that no matter how hard I'm going to play out there, no matter how good I do, it's not going to mean anything, right? Because at the end of the day, the only thing I care about is winning. So I want to see the Bears win for Justin. I want to see some W's up on the board here. And I really do think that we could squeak out here looking pretty good at the second half of the season. I really do. Call me optimistic, but it's just how I feel. So, yeah, as a Bears fan, if you really want Matt Nagy gone, you just got to lose a lot more games, and I guess Justin has to play a lot worse. But here's my thing, and here's my hope. Even if he stays, I need to see a new offensive coordinator. I need to see a new offensive coordinator in Chicago at the end of the year. It's not to disrespect Bill Lazor, just we need a new offensive coordinator by the end of the year, one that's a long-term solution and one that's there to basically put Nagy in the hot seat and say, hey, halfway through next year, if things aren't looking good, this guy will take your job.
And now that you said that, I'm just going to also mention this, is that Ryan Pace is tied to the Saints organization. And last point I'm going to make before we get out of this thing. How long was that trio of Sean Payton, Drew Brees, and Pete Carmichael, the offensive coordinator, how long did that dominate the NFL? So we're seeing a trend here where great teams that have great quarterbacks have stability at the head coaching position, but also the offensive coordinator position. And I think more so the offensive coordinator position for a quarterback is more important because it is the offensive coordinator that has certain schemes, that is typically the play caller, that is the main guy in charge of offensive game planning every single week. Team to team, it differs around the league, but if you have stability at that offensive coordinator position, you know what? It goes a long way towards keeping your quarterback happy while keeping your quarterback consistent. I mean, if you want to talk about a quarterback that's not happy, Aaron Rodgers is pretty pissed off when Mike McCarthy let Nathaniel Hackett go. And so to keep Aaron Rodgers happy, what did Matt LaFleur do? His first hire in 2019 was bringing back Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, so yeah, goes both ways, guys. But anyways, that's going to do it from us. We're going to get out of this thing. I want to go eat dinner, and Max is still quote unquote sick, but make sure you're following us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow myself and Max on Twitter at Usayd Coach and at Max Smith ESM. We'll be back in a couple of days with a Bears Ravens game and break down what needs to happen for the Bears to slow down Lamar Jackson, why they should be following the Miami Dolphins game plan, as well as what a big win at home against a strong AFC North team could mean for Justin Fields' confidence. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, bear down, stay safe, enjoy the weather wherever you may be because it's snowing here in Illinois, and peace out.